Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Super Fast Income. Christian here, and today's guest is a property powerhouse who transformed a kitchen table startup into a property sourcing machine, sourcing over 45 million in property in just 5 years. Susanna Cole has completed over 200 deals, lives between Barcelona and Bristol, and runs her empire largely through automation and smart systems. But here's what makes her story extraordinary. During COVID, she's battled and beat 4 different cancers while still growing her property business. She's here today to show you exactly how to build a property portfolio alongside your career. Susanna, welcome to Super Fast Income.
Very nice to be here. Very nice to be here. And I'm going to watch your hand signals so that I don't talk for hours about property, but your audience can get what they need from it.
Susanna, you have sourced 45 million in property, starting from your kitchen table. For our listeners who are busy professionals, what was the pivotal moment that made you realize property could be more than just a side project?
I think, like many of us in Britain, because supply and demand, because we don't have enough houses being bought, and therefore house prices have significantly maintained their trajectory, their capital growth, their capital gains. It was buying my own houses. So when my children were young, I was head of household, which had some advantages, but some, your shoulders were heavy with the responsibility of these 2 beautiful babies. And so at nighttime, when I ran a professional job, at nighttime, I would buy a wreck of a house. And then when they were asleep, I would renovate the house myself. And then when the house was beautiful, I would sell it, and then we'd move into the next wreck. Partly because I wasn't going to go out because the kids were fast asleep, and, I wanted to be a mum, and I wasn't really going to watch television, so I might as well do something. And it was watching both of those early family homes double in value. And as my canny Scots lawyer said to me at the time, and he didn't mean it rudely, he said, you do realise the fact that you've made all this money, it's got very little to do with you and is entirely to do with the market. And I didn't take it as an offence. He was right. I learned a lot more from property than I did from my professional day job.
Many of our listeners are successful in their careers but want to build something on the side. How did you structure your first property deals while managing other commitments? And what surprised you most about the process?
Yes. So at that point, I had a director level job. It was the second of my director level jobs. So the responsibility is fairly strong. And at that point, it was that decision, like maybe many of you listeners, to say, look, I'm really not going to stay within this corporate environment for the rest of my life because you want to take every inch of me. And that's appropriate for you guys, but it may not be appropriate for me and my family. So how I structured the first few deals was I worked with private investors. The very first one, I took money out of my flexible mortgage for myself. You very quickly run out of money as a property investor. I always bought discounted from the very get-go, and then you want to refinance and rent back out. And as soon as I was able to buy discounted, I didn't want to wait the 6 months delay to be able to refinance and pull all my money back out and go again. So the structuring was born of frustration. If I can find something for 75 grand instead of 100 and it's worth 100, I really don't want to wait 6 months and then go do it again. I want to go do it again tomorrow. And as a result, what I did very early on was I worked with private investors. So I was still working very full time as a marketing director in a very significant museum in Bristol. And I was sourcing discounted deals. I was buying them myself. And I bought, so for example, my first HMO worked with who's now a dear friend of mine. He lent me 100% of the value. He lent me 40 grand of the renovation. So it was all bought with cash. I renovated it, refinanced it, and paid him back out and went again. So quite a significant risk for him, but he had first charge on that property and second charge on another property. And therefore, that's an infinite equation. If you can find discounted and you can find people to lend you the entire amount, and then you can renovate, refinance, rent out, and go again. How delicious. So I did. So let's take the house. This one was called Castle Road, and my investor was called Anthony, lovely chap. I bought it for 150. It was worth 235. So effectively, he lent me 150,000 quid to buy the house, and he took, as we call it, a first charge, which is almost the same as a private mortgage. So it's as if he was the bank and lent me a mortgage. But normally the banks want you to put in a percentage. Well, private investment, you can decide between the two of you how that works. What works for him, what works for you. So he said, yep, I'll lend you the entire purchase price, 150,000. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. And that will be the first charge. And I will lend you 40 grand on the renovation. So for £150,000 purchase, he lent me 190. So obviously, if I had to sell that quickly, at a discount, if I got into distress or the business got into distress, he wouldn't get his full amount back. So he has to secure the first part of his money on the property, almost the same as a bank, a first charge, a mortgage. And then he has to take a second charge on a different property, meaning there's a first charge, like a mortgage perhaps on that property. So he sits behind the first lender as the second lender. So again, if we look at that second property, again, if my business had ever gotten into distress and it was, say, repossessed, it would be sold. The first lender, the first charge, gets the priority of the money, and anything left, then you have the second charge, the second lender who sits behind. So it's kind of like a queue for lenders, if you like.
You have completed over 200 deals in less than 5 years. What's your proven strategy for finding profitable deals when you don't have a whole day to search? And how can our listeners replicate this process?
Okay, so I'm quite straight speaking. There is no magic bullet, but there are some shortcuts I now would advise that I didn't use. So can I go back and say when did I not work? Sundays, family time. When did I work? Evenings when the children were in bed, mornings before they got up, and all day Saturday. So I used to have a house full of kids and they would have lots of fun, and I would feed them food and go back to working, but technically I was still there looking after them. So I just want to lay out there was still an important time for family. So speaking plainly, because of course I didn't have a financial backup, I needed to put every penny into this business, and therefore I didn't take any shortcuts. So I worked probably another 30 to 40 hours a week. Now that may not be effective for all of your clients, so let me give them some shortcuts. But the number one thing that made a difference was buying the deals discounted. If you can find something and we did £45 million worth of source deals that we got agreed for 30 million quid. So if you can buy something that is worth 400, that you buy it for 300, straight away, you have every opportunity to make money from that property. And typically 1% of properties are sold discounted, 99% are sold for full price. So that is your game changer. It's the buying discounted, inherent, having the profit in. Now, were I to do it again, maybe with a little bit more cash flow, or wanting to not be utterly knackered, that's a technical term, people, then what I would probably do would be to outsource more quickly some of the work. Particularly, I would probably bring in a PA very quickly. These days you can do that offshore, particularly in the Philippines, in order to do some of the administration side of life. Yeah. But what I did anyway was I tried to systematize very, very quickly. If we have to repeat something, I'm going to put it in a system. I'm going to write templates. We're going to try and use automation and systems as fast as we possibly can. So eliminate, outsource, eliminate, automate, delegate, or do it yourself.
So if you had a VA today, what kind of task would you give them if you were just starting out?
Sure. Very first one. So can we presume the person is more or less in my situation, like they do have some money, but they don't have all the money in the world? They've got enough that the banks are going to look at them favorably. They've got an ambition to buy a property portfolio, but they don't have all the money in the world. And every single property developer and investor, by the way, runs out of money at some point. So at some point, you are going to need private investors, even if it makes you kind of shudder inside and being terribly British. So the first thing I would do would be to outsource the booking of all the appointments. Obviously, you can do it through Calendly, but you still will sometimes need somebody to make a phone call to say, look, Susanna would love, she met you last week. She'd love to have a call in the diary. What time works for you? So I would outsource that kind of human administration that's needed. The second thing is obviously managing emails. The third thing is organizing some of the administrative side within a lettings portfolio, which you can use through outsourcing to letting agents, but nonetheless, you're legally responsible. So you have to make sure you've got your certificates. So you would use a software system, but you don't need to be uploading those certificates. I've got somebody doing it right now. She's doing an amazing job on it. So it's the administration that is repeating that can be systematized, like booking in people who potentially could be your lenders into your diary, organising all your certification from your letting agent and chasing them up when they're not there, that kind of thing. And I outsourced bookkeeping from the beginning as well, so that you simply once a week meet and agree what bills are going to be paid. So from the beginning, I did part-time outsourcing, and I did UK-based because there wasn't really that offshore industry when I started. But now there is that offshore industry, and I was looking at our team's invoices this morning. So we're talking hundreds and hundreds of hours straight away. And those are repeating tasks. Now, your audience is professional. They will have managed people. They know that there are A's, B's, C's, D's, and E's, and they will know that it's not just a case of saying, I'm going to outsource and I don't need to think about it. There is still a quality provision that's needed, a quality assessment and identification of, 7 is adequate work, 8 is better than adequate, 9 is a joy, and 10 is you didn't need to involve me. And my gosh, look at how amazing that is, and you're getting a massive bonus. So you still will need to do that quality control checking. Otherwise, your business plummets. You've got to have A-listers in your business. Mm-hmm. So hundreds of hours from the beginning, which was great.
Looking back at over 200 deals, what are the biggest mistakes you see busy professionals make when they start investing in property, and how can our listeners avoid them?
Okay, so the first thing your listeners do not want to do, and make sure you're not drinking your coffee because you'll spit it out, is they do not want to do property porn. Most people do property porn. And by that, my lovely people, I mean scrolling Rightmove, scrolling Zoopla, and basically doing Tinder for property. No, I did not have all day. I had a full-time director level marketing job and 2 children, and I was the solo parent to support them. And therefore I could not afford to do that kind of scrolling waste of time stuff. So I went straight to source, which is pick up the phone, call the agents. And I also measured my performance, if you want to call it that, because it's very easy to stick with your favorites because they're fun. But you don't know where the discounted deals are going to be placed. And so I measured everything and assessed my KPIs on a weekly basis and identified, I didn't phone them because that person's a bit grumpy. Okay, get on the phone. So actually it was making the phone calls directly. Now, these days, could you outsource that to somebody else? Yes, if you train them correctly. I have many students these days. We have estate agency scripts, and it is a repeating conversion process. So the answer is yes, that could be outsourced to somebody else. Now, and again, these days, you can probably improve it through looking at some of the many fintech or prop tech or PropFin, whatever it is, fintech property, I don't know what the word is, because there are many of those search engines now or programs that you can actually identify discounted deals as well. So that will get you there faster. But the old-fashioned, pick up the phone, go direct to source. I never once in the 217 deals that we sourced actually looked for a deal on Rightmove, ever. Waste of time. Everyone else is looking at that. You are looking for the sweet spot when the property has arrived in the estate agent's office or the auction house office, and they're thinking, oh my Lord, and they haven't yet even written up the spec. You pick up the phone. It's ideal for your needs. You go out there later on that day. You view it. You put an offer in that night. So it lands with them the next morning. They don't even need to write it up. Yeah. And then you got it bought 6 weeks later or 8 weeks later. So you're looking for that sweet spot between they haven't yet done the work and you could just be the one and done, and then they could go and sell something else. Yeah.
How important are relationship with agents for sourcing property? Because most of the time, as you said, there are people that intercept this property even before they go to the market.
Yeah. It's important, but it's surprisingly less important than you might think. So at the time that we were running the sourcing business, we were doing around about between 48 and 53 deals a year. So we were a good buying machine, weren't we? We're probably the biggest buyer of secondhand houses that, within those years. At least I didn't know of anyone else who was buying more. There may have been, I just didn't meet them. And so on the one hand, they trust you because you deliver. But on the other hand, our phones didn't ring off the hook. So you still have to be very proactive. So it's important, but do not assume they're going to call you. And then the second part of that, I would really want to qualify. It's important how you decide the quality of the relationship is going to be. So the agents, if you think about their job, it's a FaceTime job. It's, if you're good, it's early in the morning till late at night. It's constantly solving problems. It's trying to hand on pieces to work to other administrators in your team who may or may not be very good at doing the conveyancing. Estate agents are kind of slightly notorious, not very good at doing that kind of thing. It's chasing up lawyers, all of that stuff. If you can help deliver that for them, even though technically it's their job, then amazing. And then the other part of the relationship is do not go in there as the alpha. So in their quarter of a mile location, whether the kid, and I'm in my 50s now, so I can say the word kid, whether the kid is 18 or 20 and an estate agent with spiky hair, they probably still know more about their quarter of a mile radius than you. So whether you're a multimillionaire or run the FTSE 100, they are better than you in that location. So they are the alpha, you are the beta. And what was the number one reason we got all the deals? Because we were humble. And other property investors have occasionally a bit of I've got money, they sort of stick their chest out. But the reality is anybody who wants to buy a house has got money. So you're not unique, you're not unusual, tuck it away, let's get on with business. So actually I genuinely accepted that within their circle, I was the beta, they were the alpha. And I'm telling you, that is the relationship component that got us deals.
For professionals who have some savings but not enough to buy a property outright, can you walk us through how you structure your first investor deal and what made them trust you with their money?
So the way we did deals was one of two ways. Either we packaged on deals to investors and basically we said, hey, it's worth 400. We found it for 300. Do you want it? Great. Pay us a fee. And then they bought it. And how they would typically buy those deals is they would typically buy them with a mortgage. They would do the renovation themselves, pay for the renovation, and then they'd refinance it. So the BRRR, buy, refurb, refinance, and rent out model. Typically, occasionally they would sell it as well for money for profit. So if they were doing that, what they would be doing is they'd be putting 25% down of a deposit for the buy-to-let mortgage, and they would get a 75% mortgage based on the rental income. And then they always made sure that they had a mortgage provider that could do a further advance. So they checked that opportunity in advance. And then when it was finished and it looked much nicer, and of course it was kind of valued, if you like, a little bit higher, they could go back to the mortgage advisor and say, look, it is, we just got lucky. We got it for 300, but you and I know it's worth 400. So can you give us that further advance and give us all our cash back out? And then you go again. So that would be how the investors did the buy-to-let. Now, the other type of deal that we did very frequently, at one point with 30 of them on the go at the same time, all with investors, it was a little bit hectic, was we would buy and sell together. So Christian, say you were the investor and I was the delivery partner. You would own the property. The only money of yours that I would touch would be the refurb cash. And so in that instance, we either had investors with pure cash, or in the case you gave me where the investor doesn't have all the cash, but they still want to make a profit in a flip, but they don't want to do no work at all, you would get a bridge. And at that point, there are all sorts of different bridges, but typically they would put in 30% deposit, and then the bridge would cover 70%, and then the investor would pay for the renovation. But you can get bridges where they roll up the interest, where you pay all the interest up front, where you can potentially go up to 85% deposit with a 15%, but of course that's going to cost you. So that's generally how my investors did it. They put in their deposits and they used the appropriate financial vehicle, whether it was a buy to sell or a buy to let. And we did the work and we got paid, they got paid, everybody was happy.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
With the current climate, what would you say about over-leveraging and using bridge finance? And, what is working now that maybe wasn't working before, and what is not working now which worked before?
Okay, what is definitely not working now, which worked before, in my opinion, the people may have it working great, is two things. There used to be a same-day refinance, so you could buy a discounted property, do a very quick bridge with somebody, pay them a dollop of cash, and then pull out your further advance. That was what we saw with Mortgage Express. I unfortunately came into the market just when that went. Oh man, can you imagine how many properties I'd have bought? I wouldn't have needed to do so much private fundraising. So that has gone, or long gone. But what ended up happening was people bought duds because the money was so easy and people went bust, and people who are all about the deal but not about closing, making sure everything was tickety-boo, you got your gas certificates, were kind of attracted to that kind of deal. And this is a proper business, And then and I would say, and the other thing that I personally don't like is when people do HMO on commercial valuations. So can I break that down for people who... So an HMO is a house, a shared house, a house of multiple occupation. Let me give you an example of mine. I have very good quality HMOs. They're for students, 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms. Everybody has an ensuite. You could do a little bit of Instagramming because the design is quite nice inside. They're very high quality. And obviously it's 5 households or 6 households, depending on the house, all sharing. So that's an HMO. It does need a license these days, typically. Yeah. And you can do 2 ways of funding that. I like bricks and mortar. What is that house worth? If I was to turn it back into a family home, what is it worth? Right? That's what I work on because I'm old school. However, you can do what's called a commercial valuation, which is almost treated like a commercial business and say, well, the covenant, in the way that if you had a commercial building and you had Starbucks in there, or you had a lady or a gentleman selling wool to grannies, which business is probably more profitable, which business is going to give more security? And of course, it would be Starbucks. So if you had Starbucks in there, your commercial valuation of the same bricks and mortar is going to be much higher than if you had somebody selling wool, considering there aren't that many people knitting anymore. So the margin's not going to be that great, whereas the margin on boiling water is amazing for Starbucks. So some people like to do a commercial valuation on an HMO because, to give you an example, on some of my properties, if I was renting it out as a single let, is probably £1,800. And if I'm renting it out as a multi-let, it's double that, 3,600 to 3,800 to 4,000. So you could then do a commercial valuation and get loads more cash out of the property. But I don't want you to do that, because when the tides go out, we see who's not wearing underwear, don't we? No, thank you. So I personally want everybody to be fairly measured. And my equation is 100 minus your age should be your loan to value. Now, when you start, guys, you're not going to be that, because you're going to be a little bit more highly geared. But as quickly as you possibly can, get to 100 minus your age. That's relatively safe. I had a dear friend who reached the age of 65, very, very lovely human, and couldn't get funding because they said, well, we're not going to give you another 25-year mortgage. What? Where'd you go? Yikes. So you got to be paying these babies off, in my opinion.
Susanna, you have faced significant personal challenges, including battling 4 cancers during COVID. How did this experience shape your approach to risk management in property investment? And what advice would you give our listeners about creating resilient investment strategies?
So the first thing to say was I was fortunate in that very unfortunate situation because I had built my property portfolio. There were some times that I redlined it. That is true, cash flow wise. And it would have been awful if I had had that diagnosis when I didn't have a very stable business. So as quickly as you can get to a stable business, and with hindsight, it would have been better not to kind of redline it and have very little in the bank at times when you're managing fairly large assets. So the benefit, that what it taught me was that a stable asset base, paying income, and also without jumping into any depth, our NHS, as we all know, is under duress. And that's a very polite version to tell you guys, if I hadn't spent over 100 grand on my own treatment, I wouldn't be alive, because the department where I was being treated was dysfunctional. For whatever reason, none of my business. So I had to go private to remain alive. So not only did I stop working, I also then had to put my hand in, despite being quite nicely taxed, which I'm quite happy to pay for schools and hospitals, I then had a double tax because of the inability to deliver the appropriate life-saving care. So it taught me two things. If you're in the middle of growth, put in additional risk management, which was kind of part of your question. And what I would love a person to see is you're ideally, in a perfect world, and I know entrepreneurs will stretch themselves, you're going to put in a year's a year's turnover of cost. So not turnover, but a year's costs in the bank. I would love to see that. I remember in the 2008-2009 recession speaking to a chap who was chief exec of 100 million a year turnover business in construction. And he said, in the good days, I fight with my finance director because I want the money. And in the bad years, I'm so grateful he's a stubborn SOD because he insists we have a year's worth of costs in the bank at all times. And that is why this construction business has been in business for over 100 years. And you think, aha, you're right. But we small entrepreneurs think we know better and we stretch ourselves. So number one, I would say risk manage, identify your costs, and ideally have a year's worth in, even if it's going to cost you some interest to pay for it. Okay. I didn't do that. So I'm telling you what you should do, not what I did do. And then number two, actually the number one thing I'm grateful for was I had a very solid property portfolio. So whilst it's a frustration to have to pay over six figures when I'm paying tax and willingly so to support hospitals. So please, at the point at which I'm vulnerable, it'd be gorgeous if you could support me. It really wasn't. Well, it was a big deal, but it really wasn't a bit, it just made me shrug my shoulders once or twice and get on with it. And you couldn't have done that with a day job. I took 3.5 years off. I didn't work because I wanted to work on my immune system. You couldn't have done that with a day job. I am under 5 different professors now because I pushed to all the testing more than, and being a patient is unfortunately a very full-time job. So I was very, very grateful to have built that asset base, which was enabled me to stay alive, to pay for being alive, but also to be curious about the latest scientific, white coat developments, which enabled me to have the best treatment possible in the UK. So the other piece of advice is build a property portfolio as fast as you can, people, because it keeps you afloat in those difficult black swan moments.
That's a very good reminder.
Yeah.
So you now manage properties while living between Barcelona and Bristol, and now you are in Barcelona. Good for you, Susanna.
Yes.
So
I was down the beach this morning doing a workout.
What are 3 most crucial systems or digital tools that allow you to run this business remotely? And how can our listeners start implementing them from day one?
Sure. So if we talk about the property portfolio side, I think the 3 critical ones. So I have a superb letting agent that manages my property portfolio. My portfolio is primarily in Bristol, and then I have in Glasgow as well, because that's where my parents live and that's where my son went to college. So I just kept the flat. So I have a different letting agent, and they're very good as well managing it up there. So I have feet on the ground with the letting agents. So number one is we use Arthur Online. There are many more out there. Landlord software, and we use it thoroughly. So I am very conscious that I'm housing other people's children. I mean, I know they're adults. I get that. I totally respect that. But come on, they're somebody's baby. And so I like to have all the health and safety. I like to have all the fire certificates. I want to make sure everything's done by the book because this is somebody's kid. So we use a management software, a landlord software, which highlights when certificates are coming up. And also it's legislation, by the way. If you get something wrong, it's a £30,000 fine and a criminal court case. No, thank you. So I like that digital reminder that is set up for landlords, where I can ensure everything is as is. So that's number one. Number two is I work with a team of VAs who work full-time for me out in the Philippines. So last week was terribly exciting because they had a typhoon. And the person who does the majority of the administration work within my property portfolio, I actually interviewed her during an earthquake. And she was such cool as cucumber. I said, shall we stop the interview and you can come back later? And she said, no, I'll just walk out and I'll go into the street because it's a bit safer and we'll keep going on the interview. Woohoo! And we did. And I was like, are you sure? I don't mind at all rescheduling this. No, perfectly happy. This is a normal kind of occurrence. And so the second piece of software, apart from making sure you've got A-listers in your business, both an letting agent and your admin team, is we use Slack. So we'll use Slack every single day. We've got multiple channels, and that's really important for fast communication. And then I think the third piece of software is probably very simple. It vies between Google Drive, where we have our business, which is organized into a server and then years. We started that in 2013. So every year, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, I'm going to give you some more software. And WhatsApp. Why? Because if it's a very fast thing that we need for the letting agent or for our VA team, we'll do it on WhatsApp. And if it's a slower planned project, then my team members, their action lists are on Google Drive and they just pop in when they finish the task, or they might put a link to say, I finished it. Do you want to just have a quick check of it? So that's really, so there you go. WhatsApp, Google Drive, Slack, Arthur Online. But then the final one is xero.com. So I work with Rachel, bookkeeper. We worked together for 15 years now. We meet by Zoom. There you go, Zoom. There's another one. Oh, hang on. And Calendly and Otter AI, where you record your meetings and it gives you a summary of everybody's tasks. So we meet on a Wednesday. Rachel will highlight what bills need paying, I always approve them and then she pays them. And then I jump in usually on a Wednesday evening, Thursday morning, once a month, and I just double check the accounts and have a look at the profit and loss, the balance sheet and the strategy side. There you go. And quality people. So that's the painful part. Let's be really real about this. To recruit the great administration team I have now, I probably went through trialing out 4 times as many people. So it's about a 20-25% hit rate. And that's painful, saying to somebody, I'm sorry, this isn't working. Yes, nobody likes that.
Everybody being there. So looking back at over 200 deals, what are the biggest mistakes you see busy professionals make when they start investing in property, and how can our listeners avoid them?
Not starting with the end in mind. What are you about? Why do you want to get into property? So are you building an asset base, or are you building a relatively quick cash flow through flipping or deal packaging? And so if you don't know, you're going to get kind of shiny penned, super excited, go off the path and not understand what you're in it for. And then the second one is measurement, because as entrepreneurs, we like to plan, we like to do, we're not very good at measuring. And I count myself in that too. So where do I fall down? Not enough measurement. And I actively try and combat that in my own entrepreneurial vibe, if you like. So A, write a plan, B, identify what the measurements are, and then C, measure it, because then you can tweak before it's the end of the year if it hasn't gone quite to plan. Because property is predictable. How many phone calls, how many viewings, how many offers to get a deal. Pre, during and post for auction is very, very predictable. So if you know how many deals you want to do, you need to work backwards and know how many phone calls, viewings and offers pre, during and post at auction. It's very predictable. But if you don't measure your activity, there's an emotional, oh, it's not working. No, you're just not doing the activity. Job done.
So, talking about goals, for someone starting their property journey today alongside their career, what would you suggest are realistic 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year goals, and what milestone should they be watching for?
Okay, can I give you my deliverables and then we'll talk about folks' goals? Okay, so the first 18 months I worked full time, and I think year 1 I did 3 deals and year 2 I did 4 deals. Full time, gaining my confidence. Then, and I was still working full time as a director. And then I went full time into property, and I think we did 48 deals that year. Yes. So, what does that tell you? Time. Time and a bit of confidence and a bit of practice is the game changer. So, what do I think is completely possible? If you're working full time, certainly 5 deals a year is a completely possible deliverable. That is a rinse and repeat job. And as soon as you go into it full time, if you do decide that that's appropriate, look at the kind of numbers we were doing, which is completely wreckable. So it really depends on where the person wants to get to, and then they work backwards again. So I'm going to go back to work out what you want your end goal to be, come backwards from that, and then figure out how that breaks down year 1, year 3, and year 5. And it's the first 18 months, it is frustrating because you're kind of learning your skills, you're earning your stripes. And after that, it's really a rinse and repeat. So you're going to go an awful lot faster. So what do I think is realistic? Oh, comfortably 3 to 5 deals a year with a very full-time job. And as soon as you can get your processes, your systems, and your A-list of people, 10 to 20 deals a year, if you're working with funders as well, if you're not funding it all yourself.
Just to clarify, when you say your A-list of people, what do you mean exactly?
Your broker, your bookkeeper, your accountant, your lawyer, and then your administrators, your letting agents, your key estate agents if you're going to flip. Because the biggest mistake people make is they just don't do their cash flow predictions. So I would definitely say to your guys, write your business plan, measure it, but also do your cash flow predictions and revisit it on the first of the month, because property sucks up cash before it spits it out years and years later, which is why with that rather tricky and painful diagnosis, I was very fortunate. I was at the point that the properties were built, and they were just chucking out cash. Very useful.
If our listeners were to take just one action this week to start a property investment journey while keeping their day job, what should that action be? And why?
In my opinion, it's write your business plan, which isn't an analysis by paralysis, by the way, guys. Although your listeners can have a giggle at me. For somebody that did a lot of activity, I spent 18 months polishing my business plan. Honestly, because it's terrifying getting into property at the beginning. So I ended up with a 16-page, utterly perfect business plan, which backwards, forwards, upside down, cash flow wise, it was examined to the nth degree. And then, of course, when I got started, did it get delivered? No, of course it didn't. But what the benefit of, and also I think there are 2 types of people. Are you a parachute on the way down person, or are you a ducks in the row person? I am a ducks in the row person. If you look at my social media, that was written a year in advance and planned so that I can think things through carefully. That's generally me. But what it did allow me to do was almost rehearse being a property investor. It was almost like learning to drive, where I had somebody else that could take over the wheel and put the brakes on if I was about to have a crash. So by rehearsing it with a business plan first, it meant that I kind of came to all the things that could go wrong, or all the gaps. Oh, where do I find builders? Oh, where do I find lawyers? Oh, and I could do all of the work to fill in the gaps in advance of launching. So it meant that any crashes were minor skiffs instead of head-on fatalities. So I personally think write your business plan and really rehearse it. Give yourself a deadline. This is when I'm going to take action, but rehearse it so you've really thought through in advance what you're going to do, what would you do if it goes wrong, who do you need in your team, how are you going to measure it, where are you going to get the funding from, where are you going to get the deals from, where are you going to get your clients from, what kind of strategy are you going to do. That will give you a smoother journey, although property's never totally. Yes.
Susanna, you achieved so much so far. You have more than 2,000 videos on your YouTube channel. What keeps you going?
Well, I chilled for 3.5 years, actually. But, for example, this weekend, although I had my family visiting who stayed around the corner, I actually had one of my former students, a lovely guy called Andy Norman, his wife, Sarah. They came to visit. I taught them 10 years ago, or him 10 years ago. And he is financially free, and she left her job in May. Isn't that fabulous? So I like property. I find it really interesting. I like entrepreneurship. I find it really interesting. And I love the effect that property has on both on my life and other people's lives. You know, we ate ice cream and cakes and went for walks and went up at Montserrat and these were and you could see the impact of property on their life. You know, Andy became financially free quite a number of years ago. And this summer, or May, his wife left her job as well. And that's kind of quite rewarding, isn't it? To see that can work for people who put their shoulder to the wheel a little bit. Yeah.
It is. So there are so many people currently that are living in the UK, especially wealthy people and property investors.
Yep, there are.
What is your take on that?
It's both. I can see two ends to the middle. So on the one hand, the tax, particularly folks are going to Dubai, aren't they? But they're going to other places as well. And I see why people are doing that. And I've always been a person quite proud to pay tax, to pay for schools and education. But I felt enormously, tearfully let down by our medical system. So I'm a little bit less proud to pay tax and donate into my community these days. So I can understand why somebody would say, I'm out, Buster Jim. This ain't work. You know, the social contract we have, you've broken it. Or in their view, you've broken it. So I'm out. So I can understand that, and they're going to accelerate their business significantly because that gives them more money to put back into their business. Particularly now, when we have global businesses, we don't need to be location reliant. I have a location reliant asset base where I am not location reliant. So I spent 3 months this summer in Brooklyn, going out to see American music and obviously working in the daytime. And I went 6.5 weeks in Thailand last year, traveling. So I'm not location reliant. So you really understand that people can move to a entrepreneurial friendly location. And I understand why people would do that more than I did before. On the other hand, one of the benefits to Britain is that we have a very stable justice system. We have a very stable parliament. We have a very, well, you know, you can say what you like about politics, but the concept and the in comparison to other countries, you know what you're getting, and so I wouldn't want to be. So, for example, I love being in Barcelona. I love being in Spain. But until I'm bilingual, I would not want to be a formal resident here because the tax authorities are brutal. They just take money from your bank and go. And until I was completely bilingual, would I be able to entirely understand any kind of interaction with them? No. And I don't want that to be a disadvantage. And for the same reason, until I was entirely bilingual, would I want to base my medical care here, despite the fact that Spain has an amazing medical care system? No, because I'm at a disadvantage. So I think we still can appreciate our stable systems, which actually from stability comes growth. But yeah, I'm a little bit less enamored through that very distressing and upsetting experience of not being caught in the net when I was the vulnerable one. Yeah.
Susanna, thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and sharing your time with us. If our listeners want to follow your journey, where can they keep listening about you and your amazing things?
We would, well get in touch, folks. We'd love you to. I mean, you can Instagram, Susanna Cole UK, YouTube. We've just gone over 2 million views, and you can look at the early ones where I'm running around doing deals. That is Susanna Cole, The Good Property Company. Or we have a website, and I produce a lot of free things for people. You know, we've got really super checklists and a 102-page book for people that they can download. Don't print it, guys. It's a PDF, so don't print it. Just read it online. And that's on my website, thegoodpropertycompany.co.uk. But get in touch. We'd really welcome that. I'd really like that. And good luck to everybody. Taking the step in property is so worth the journey. Even the little speed bumps or the occasional speed bumps that will keep you sleepless at night, you will have a few of them. 100% get into it.
Thank you so much, Susanna. Talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.